year-end clearance pricing during Happy Honda Days at your local Honda dealer. Why settle for less than a Honda?
The first of 6 officers accused in the death of Freddie Gray, Officer William Porter, took the stand Wednesday as the defense began its side. Now the defense will call more witnesses today. Here now, though, to make sense of the order of witnesses, Attorney Jeremy Eldridge with EN Lawyers. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. The very first question that a lot of people have is, I guess a lot of us were shocked. People that were not in the judicial system were shocked that Porter went on the first day, right after they actually brought in one witness before, pathologist, but then they came in and put Porter on the stand. He's already done.
Well, first off, nothing about how this case has been handled has been normal. I think we can all agree on that. But the witnesses that the defense may call after Porter are likely going to be expert witnesses. And if you're going to put expert witnesses on, it's not a risky venture to put your client on first, because then your experts have the ability under the Maryland rules to both assess things that were said in court as well as his prior statement. Things that could go to the procedure of the police department in belting Mr. Gray in, and then things that could go to state of mind. So it's not that big of a surprise if they're not calling factual witnesses, but instead experts, that they called Officer Porter first.
Yesterday, they had the Texas pathologist come in. He was saying that the fatal injuries, he says in his mind, because before the prosecutors were saying this happened at the 4th stop. And the stops, there was a lot of stops that were made that day, but he said, no, it's between the 5th and 6th stops. And that Porter himself, Officer Porter on the stand, said he actually touched Gray, picked him up, put him on the bench at the 4th stop. And so that kind of goes along with that expert saying before, yes, it must have happened at the 5th or 6th stop. Do you think that backed up because of the fact that he said he actually picked up Porter and put him in the van, did not belt him in? Does that help his case?
Well, what's so confusing, it 100% helps his case because we're looking at reasonable doubt. And if the 2 medical examiners can't even agree at what stop, how, when, or why this injury occurred, that seems to be reasonable doubt here. What the biggest question here is that the medical examiner, even on the state side, was using some of the officer statements to try to say when the injury occurred, except for you even heard Porter say yesterday, well, hold on a second, what you relied on in assessing his injuries wasn't even what I said. This is what I said. And the jury had the luxury of hearing it from the horse's mouth that he's saying, I never said Mr. Gray couldn't breathe after the 4th stop. I said that at the very infancy of the stop. So the jury now has the luxury of really hearing from the horse's mouth what happened and what was actually said, as opposed to hearing it from a secondary source.
Timing of when it was called, they brought Officer Novak on too, and it seemed like after hearing some of the, because we're not allowed to be in there, so our reporters relied, they tweeted out, Joy LaPola was doing it constantly yesterday. It seems like this is pointing now towards the driver of the van's responsibility, according to what the defense was working on yesterday. As Officer Goodson's, if you were Officer Goodson's, if you were his actual defense attorney, does this all of a sudden change the way that you approach your case that's going up later on?
I don't think so at all. And in fact, what really you should be highlighting is the fact that you have an Officer Zachary Novak, who, if everyone's seen the video, is the officer in uniform that puts his hand on Mr. Gray. What's so surprising here is that officer was given immunity before testifying, yet wasn't called as a state's witness.
No.
Was called as a defense witness. That is unbelievable. That kind of stuff does not happen. That is television stuff for you right there. And the issue here is that all the other defense attorneys are going to focus in on is, how do you give an officer who undeniably had more contact with Mr. Gray immunity, not call him as a witness, and then expect a jury to consider the charges and find someone guilty that had less responsibility? So that's going to be a real question for this jury. And if I'm Goodson's attorney or White's attorney, that's the exact issue that I'm going to hone in on right there, the obvious racial issues and choice of charging issues that exist in this case.
We have to go, but the last question for you, how long do you think this trial will last?
The judge has a scheduled, or not us, the city scheduled through the end of this week. And they're on a very tight schedule. So I expect that Judge Williams will keep them earnest. Exactly.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeremy Eldridge, EN Lawyers, thank you so much for coming in and giving us your angle on this. We appreciate
it.
Coming up, we are continuing to follow the breaking news out of 7, where a house fire leaves 1 dead. We'll check back in with